let me tell you guys that if you're on that big solo kick right now, go do that shit right now while you can, as much as you can, because there may be a point in time that you may not be able to go do that. Whatever your dream is, whatever it is that you need to go do hunting, go do it all as much as possible.
Absolutely.
You know?
Hey, fellow elk fanatics, if you're completely obsessed with elk hunting like me, then join me every Wednesday for tips, tactics, and stories on elk hunting, from elk hunting legends to fellow DIYers. This is the Rich Outdoors Wapiti Wednesday. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Wapiti Wednesday of the Rich Outdoors podcast, probably my favorite segment. And this episode of the podcast, one of my favorites that I've done in a long time. We might have dropped too much information in here. Like, there's some really good secrets in this podcast. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation we had with Cody Lujan. He is such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to elk hunting. You've probably seen him on MeatEater with Steven Rhinela or various other shows. Cody just has a lifetime of elk hunting experience, and I think one of the things I like most is he's such an outside of the box thinker. In this episode of this conversation, we dive into, open country bulls and the behaviors of migratory versus non-migratory herds. We also talk about some of the effects that Beetle Kill forests are having on the elk and what he's seen kind of throughout that and throughout Colorado, which is, Beetle Kill is a huge part of that. So some really good nuggets in here. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. I think this episode is gold. So hope you guys enjoy it. Real quick before the podcast, I need a huge favor from you guys. We made a really funny video for Wapiti Wednesday promotion called Alcoholics. And the problem is Facebook put the kibosh on our promotional efforts and banned the video for promotion. So I need you guys' help in sharing it and getting it out there. Click the link in the show notes. Check out the video. It's pretty funny, and give it a share. I'm going to give away a bunch of Phelps diaphragms to people who help get it out there and get around this Facebook BS rules. So head over there, check it out, share the video. Much appreciated. Thank you guys so much. I think you like it, and I think you'll really like this episode with Cody Lujan. So thanks, guys. Happy Wapiti Wednesday, right? This episode brought to you by Backcountry Fuel Box. Backcountry Fuel Box is my newest creation. It's a monthly subscription box full of backcountry meals, snacks, bars, and all kinds of cool high-energy options for your next backcountry adventure. I started the box because I wanted a way to try out all the cool new backcountry food options that were on the market. And also, so I would always have stuff on hand for my own adventures. There's just so many cool new options available. The June box had all kinds of great products and new companies that I think most people have probably never heard of. Brands like 4 Points Bars, Peak Refuel, Dark Mountain Energy, just to name a few. All in all, the June box was packed full with 10 awesome products and discount codes to all the companies within the box. Enough to taste test a few of the items and to hide the rest in my tote for September. The box is $33.30 a month, but if you use the TRO at checkout, use the TRO code, you'll get the box for $29.97 a month, and it is full of awesome stuff that you're actually going to use. Also, I just want to say a big shout out to all of you who have been sharing the box when you get it on social media. I am thoroughly humbled by the dozens and dozens of people that have been helping grow this thing, and it really does mean the world to me. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. There's a whole bunch of awesome stuff coming from this whole Backcountry Fuel project, and you guys have been awesome and instrumental in helping me get there and kind of grow this whole thing. So if you guys haven't yet, go check it out. Give it a try. There's literally zero commitment. I'm not trying to scam anyone. I just want everyone to stay signed up because the box is so awesome. Head over to backcountryfuelbox.com. Check it out. You won't be disappointed. Get signed up if you want to be a part of the July box. All right. Thanks, guys. This episode of Wapiti Wednesday brought to you by Phelps Game Calls. Phelps Game Calls are hands down my favorite diaphragms, and I've tried out just about every diaphragm on the market, and the amp frame is what I carry. The amp frame, not only is extremely easy to use, but they're the most consistent calls you can find and extremely durable. As someone who can blow out a diaphragm in just a few days, the first time I used one of the new amp frame calls, I was blown away at how long it lasted. I can get a few weeks out of a single Phelps diaphragm versus a couple days out of just about any other diaphragm on the market. Personally, I like the amp gray and the amp white, but if you don't have any idea what to use or what to try, just grab 4 or 5 of them and see what you like. You know, some of you guys are going to like locating on one, and some of you guys are going to like the sexy cow calls on another. But either way, I think you'll be able to use any of them. They all sound great and they all work super well. It's just kind of all on personal preference. A couple of you guys have asked me about the big bat bugles and if they're necessary. For me, 100%, I am naked in the woods without my bat bugle. The Phelps bat just gives me so much more reach when I'm bugling, as far as being able to be louder and carry a bugle farther into a canyon. If you only want to be the kind of guy that slips into a herd of elk and doesn't do a whole lot of screaming challenge bugles, even just having the bat as a locating tool is crucial. You can carry that bugle so much farther, locate a bull from farther away, and to me, it's an essential item in my toolkit. Go get yourself some Phelps game calls before they sell out. Before season comes, get to practicing, get good at it, use the TRO code, and you'll get free shipping off your entire order. All right, it's the Cody and Cody podcast. Welcome to the Wapiti Wednesday, Cody.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me, Code Man.
What kind of nicknames did you have as a kid?
Oh, man. Everything from Squirrel to Code Man to Codester, Coderama, Codicious.
You said Code Man. That was the first thing I thought of. I remember we played baseball as kids, and we got to like Babe Ruth or whoever it was, and you're supposed to have a nickname. And I didn't really have a nickname. Like a lot of the kids had like name plus animal. I don't know. Like that was like the thing.
Yeah.
And my coach always called me Code Man, and I hated it. But that kind of stuck throughout my baseball career. So it's funny that you're like Code Man.
Oh yeah.
That's funny. Well, speaking of nicknames, I was going to ask you how. We'll get into like who this is or whatever, because this is still like a mystery to everyone. All they know is your name is Cody. But how did the Instagram handle Elk Taco come about?
Oh man, that's pretty funny. It seems like so. My name's Cody Lujan. Do a little bit of writing for magazines here and there. Kind of slowed down over the years. You've probably seen me on either some old Hushin videos or doing some work with MeatEater crew here and there, videos and podcast wise. And the Elk Tacos moniker came about as a result of, seems like every time anybody comes to one of my elk camps, deer camps, anything, we always end up eating elk tacos. I think it was just kind of a hunting camp inspired handle, as it were.
Well, I mean, it's probably the greatest handle there is. I mean, elk tacos, like, first off, there's nothing better than tacos, and especially elk tacos. So it works out perfect.
Oh, yeah, exactly, man. And I mean, my last name's Lujan, so tacos are a big part of my culture. And we have taco night at least once a week in my house. It's always
yeah, tacos are a must-have more than just Tuesday. I think like Taco Tuesday is insinuating that we should only have tacos one day a week, and that is just not the case. I mean, it should be tacos at least 3 nights a week.
Oh, absolutely. There should be no limit to the number of nights we can eat tacos. Yeah.
That's awesome. So what's your background? I mean, you grew up hunting elk, and is that elk's kind of your go-to, or what's tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I grew up in northwestern Routt County, just south of Steamboat Springs, on a little ranch, and that was basically just one of those special places where the elk rutted, wintered, calved, and summered on. So always surrounded by elk. And I had a family that did a lot of outfitting in a couple of different national forest wilderness areas in and around the Steamboat area. So I grew up, rurally in elk country. And then I got taken on my first elk hunt when I was probably 2 months old, going up the mountain. So started here and spent half of my life in New Mexico. And I'm a recovering attorney, a recovering big game hunting guide, and a recovering fly fishing guide. So, and probably the shittiest thing I've ever done in my life was I practiced law for about 7 years. And
how did man, I got a lot of questions I don't think pertain to Wapiti Wednesday, but that whole like predicament, which is funny because like I grew up, all I wanted to be was an elk guide. My parents like, you need to go to college. And just from the outside looking in, like on a 30,000 foot view, parents were outfitters and you ended up being an attorney. Like, how did that pan out?
Yeah, well,
similar.
Well, my uncle was the outfitter, and we always just hunted. But my parents were artists, so jewelers, and it was always like, but going back to baseball, I said, well, I'm either going to play pro baseball or I'm going to go to law school since I was a kid.
Okay.
And my baseball dreams fizzled out in college, and academics kind of led the way for me. And my parents were pretty heavy in terms of encouraging that. And they said, you know what, you can always fish, you can always hunt, but go get educated, go do these things now while you're young. And then if you decide you don't want to do it, don't do it anymore. Yeah. So that's what I did. And I practiced law for about 7 years. And then now I'm a ranch broker with Hall & Hall. Ranch brokerage group. We have an office there in Bozeman as well. Nice. And so I sell ranches, investment grade ranches across the western U.S. and a little bit internationally up. So I am on in the field, I should say, probably every day. About 2/3 of the year is spent out in the field. So I get a lot of field time compared to even a lot of guides.
And you probably see a lot of really good places. I mean, as far as elk habitat, elk populations and things like that with some of these big private ranches.
I do. It's interesting. I get to see the irony is I get to see a lot of public ground, but I also get to see some of the premier hunting and fly fishing properties across the western U.S. and some of the premier hunting properties in the southern U.S. and the southeastern U.S. So I think the one takeaway is that I get to see and look for wildlife every other day, essentially. So, for 200 days a year, I'm out looking for wildlife.
Now, we were kind of talking before the podcast about, like the hunting private versus public. And I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are. And you were saying that it's kind of one of the benefits that you see is you spend a lot of time on both. What's your, just on an overall view, what's your thought on hunting? It seems like hunting public land is such a hot topic right now, and public land is a hot topic and things like that. But what's your thought on hunting public and versus private and all these other, like kind of how that mingles together?
Damn good question. They're clearly tied together. If they weren't, nobody'd be sitting fence lines. So I think one thing that I personally take pride in is killing big elk, on public land in shitty DIY units. Over the counter units. That is kind of the pinnacle of elk hunting to me. When you're on really high caliber elk hunting properties, think of, for any of those people who have drawn premium unit tags saying New Mexico, Utah, Arizona, even a couple of units here in Colorado. If you can think of going through a gate and walking onto a ranch and just be surrounded by elk that are all 5.5+ years old and, are not pressured. It really makes you feel like you're a damn good elk hunter. Mm-hmm. I think, a lot of guys, we always call it a few of my really close buddies who are more notable than I am, but I won't mention their names. We always joke about kind of these, what we call these trophy unit demigods. These guys are just playing, and, credit to them. They're knocking down some giant animals. But, I've hunted with some of these guys in public units, over the counter units, and they wouldn't hold a candle hunting wise compared to a huge portion of the public land guys that I hunt with. Mm-hmm. I think the public land hunting, you really learn how to hunt effectively if you're going to take it seriously. And you have to be successful and really to enjoy it. And by enjoying it, I mean getting more than half mile off the road. Yeah. So I think there's some benefits to being a public land guy, because then when you go when you go from an over-the-counter unit to a trophy unit, a premium draw entry unit or really good private property, it's just like, wow, man, I feel like an all-star.
It's true. I mean, you learn to cut your teeth on the public ground. I mean, obviously I grew up hunting with the masses and hunting crappy tags my entire life. And I think that's what makes you good. The one thing that interests me is that we're getting into this, I don't know, fad that like it's less of an accomplishment on the private stuff. Like, now, don't get me wrong. Like, I've had access to private stuff where I was hunting the public ground because that's where the animals were, and they didn't know. And so there's like, I get that there's a differentiation between this private 20,000 acre ranch that's been managed perfectly for elk and going and pull a bull off there versus, say a 1,000 acre ranch that the elk pass through and you get access to. It's interesting to me to see like such a negative connotation with like people killing bulls on a private ranch. Now, like there's two different things. Like you can say you killed a bull on public ground and it could be the best unit in Colorado. It's far different than saying you killed an over-the-counter bull or an over-the-counter hunt that's on public ground, right? Those are two different elk, right?
No, and I don't mean to demean the private hunting at all. I have busted my butt hard on private ground, just as hard on public to kill a bull. And sometimes some of the smallest bulls I've killed have been on really tough private ground hunts. I hunt private ground, and I don't think I'm any less of a hunter when I'm on private ground, most private ground, than I am on the public.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, like you just mentioned, the elk aren't on the ranch. You may only have 800 acres of ground to hunt, and you may have to go, because of whatever the weather and the pressure is doing, you may have to go hoof it off the ranch and get back onto the public. I mean, those are the same elk. They're, the only time I really see a distinction is in very large acreages that have been exceptionally well managed.
Yeah.
And then you start seeing animals act differently. And that's when when my ego really starts to come out and I'm like, man, I'm just glassing big bulls everywhere, calling in big bulls. Everything's going right. I'm on my game.
Yeah.
And I'll go to a kind of a normal caliber ranch and, really have to step it up to even get a cow to look at me from 300 yards away, it seems. So.
No, yeah, there's just like so many different calibers. The same as like public ground. Like there's so many variations of what public ground. I've called bulls on public ground that, being far enough back in the wilderness or wherever it may be, maybe a place that no one's hunted, and the elk act like it's a private game farm because they've just never been messed with. And I think that's a lot of what you get with some of these bigger ranches is you're just getting elk that haven't been messed with and they're comfortable. And it's like this natural state that, if you were 50 years ago calling in elk would probably look like. But now with a lot of the elk that live on ground that gets hunted all the time, they're getting pressure all the time. So they just don't have that security. They act different and things like that. Exactly.
And I will mention probably, the craziest thing I've ever seen hunting in my life, the truly wildest elk I've ever seen were on a huge remote ranch in New Mexico we're talking hundreds of thousands of acres, and we would kill 1 or 2 bulls off this place a year. And the elk were so wild that most of these elk had never seen a human. They would come in downwind of you when you'd call and literally walk up 10 feet from you. And they were so wild, they had no idea what you were, why you were there, and why you weren't a cow elk. It was unbelievable to see what, in my mind, what elk hunting was probably like 500-600 years ago.
Yeah.
But that was a complete anomaly. That was a once in a lifetime place that unfortunately I'll never get to hunt or set foot on now. Do
you think that getting to hunt some of those places or getting to guide on some of those big ranches like that has made you a better hunter?
Absolutely. I think to lean on a waterfowl hunting analogy with bird dogs, which I think George Hickok's always says, birds, birds, birds. And I think one thing, as with any sport, repetition is necessary. And, when you're elk, and mule deer for 200 days out of the year, you're more in tune with what your game eyes are on all the time. You're more in tune with where the animals are and what they're doing. So I think that private ground just being around a lot of animals and really, from the pure hunting side, seeing a lot of animals go down and how they react. I think all of that combined has made me kind of filled out my hunting background. I think the bones that everyone should put in place, in my mind, come from dogging it on public ground. And then once you really I think everybody should have a chance to spend some time guiding and seeing a lot of elk get killed. And, there's just so much that goes into repetition in that game. And you really get that on some really good private ground.
Yeah, I was really fortunate to, cut my teeth on the public ground where you'd be lucky if, you called in 2 bulls in an entire year. And then at a certain point in my life, I was just able to spend a lot of time in a really, really good unit. And it was private ground, but it was public access ground. It was just a matter of like a really good unit. And I basically had enough people and it's always spending time there to where you're calling in at least 2 bulls a day minimum, if not 5 or 6 bulls a day. And you talk about that repetition. It's insane how fast you can learn. You take the average season for a guy, say he calls in a bull a week, 2 bulls a week, and he hunts maybe 2 weeks a year, which is kind of a lot for some people. You're not learning very quickly. Whereas when you flip that and you get to be in these special units or a special property. And this is why I tell people, if you want to get really great at hunting, spend some time, go on a hunt with someone. Even if you don't have a tag, go call for someone that has a coveted tag of some kind or has access to somewhere, because you're going to get so much experience just calling in bull after bull after bull. And it's like you said, like guides get to spend every day out of there. They put a lot of bulls on the ground and they get to see what happens. And like, you just learn a lot faster when you have that fast repetition.
Exactly. I completely agree with what you said. And, guys who spend 60 days in the field are going to have hell of a better chance of killing a bull than a guy that's, may only get 3 days on the weekends to hunt.
Yeah.
So in the season. And then the guy who spends 200 days is probably going to have a step up on everybody. But the reality is, as you and I know, both have jobs and, we hunt as much as we can, but sometimes just can't do that. And that's reality for a large portion of us.
Oh, for sure. So what do you think it is? And that's where like podcasts and things like this come in handy, because, you get to pull from the experience of people who have hunted that many days, have spent that much time around elk. And so we can pull all these cool little things from so many people. That's why I love doing it. Cause every podcast that I do, I spend a lot of time hunting elk, but I pull stuff from people all the time. What do you think it is about what you do or your experience that makes you better than average?
Oh man, better than average. I'm a little uglier than average, so I think that plays into the equation quite well. But literally, I think a couple of things are the amount of time that I spend in the field on a professional basis, which is typically spent with hunting and fishing clients. So if we're not actually hunting, we're talking about hunting. We're looking at animals as if we were hunting. And then secondly is just I would have to say, the overall background, a lifetime of hunting applied to learning some country exceptionally well, learning the animals, learning how they react, and really taking everything that I've learned from hunting different states and guiding and being on ranches and public land around the Western United States, and kind of compartmentalizing that so that you start seeing things and you start realizing when animals are acting a certain way, why they're doing that and what they're doing and where they're going to go. So kind of a jumbled answer, but I think that kind of cuts to the core of it.
How different, I guess you've spent a lot of time in New Mexico and Colorado. How differently do those bulls act between the two places?
Ooh, good question. Even hunting some of the, I've killed some of my best bulls have come from really, I guess, kind of under the radar junky units in New Mexico where, there's low population densities, a lot of hunting pressure. But even then, I would say those bulls, you catch them out in the open more, even in the heavy timbered terrain. I would find bigger bulls out post, more in that post rut time frame in October than I ever would in Colorado. I mean, our big bulls our big bulls, A, don't leave dark timber, and B, they certainly won't do so post rut. Whereas in New Mexico, I feel like those bulls are more apt to be out in the open, and they're more apt to be glassable and locatable. So,
do you know why? Do you have a theory on why?
I don't. Aside from the fact that it may just be hunter numbers. While these units may see 100 hunters a season, that same unit, if it were in Colorado, might have 700 or 800 hunters. So it's likely a factor of pressure, less pressure. And then I think the other factor that I've noticed in New Mexico is, and this is nothing against New Mexico hunters, some of the best guys I hunt with are from New Mexico, and some of the best lessons I've learned come from New Mexico hunters. But in general, I'd say Colorado really brings out the backcountry guys. You'll be 7-8 miles back in and you're like, shit, man, whose track is this? Or you look up and, there's some guys that you've never seen in this spot before. New Mexico, you get a half mile off the road, man, and it's exceptionally rare to really run into anyone. So I think there's, just some dynamics culturally in terms of how people hunt between those two states.
The one thing I remember, the wake up call that I got the first time I went to New Mexico and hunted, and it was just so different than anything I'd ever done, and bulls were so different. Everything, it was a great experience, and you learn a lot from chasing those elk that they travel so far, and they just do things so differently than any elk I'd ever hunted. It was just it was a wake up call, but at the same time, I think it added to my my playbook. And long term, and it's like you hunt down there a couple of times, you learn what elk do and what they don't do, and a lot of fun. And I think hunting different places, having these different experiences just adds to the playbook and what you can do. And like you said, some of those elk, it's just crazy how they'll just be in the wide open and not have a worry in the world, but you never see that somewhere else.
Exactly. And I think you just touched on a really good thing that I forgot, and that is, man, I have never seen non-migratory elk travel so far in my life as I have these New Mexico bulls. I mean, literally, I finally figured out, it took me 3 or 5 years to figure what these bulls were doing in a specific area. I was hunting a corner of one unit, and these elk were going on a 3 to 5 day loop through 3 different hunting units. And so during a 10-day season, I might only catch them in my unit 2 or 3 days. And then I found that out because I was watching a monster bull, and I started driving around because I lost him, and I found him, 15 miles away in the next unit. And then a day later, I found him in the next door unit, 6 miles away from where I was hunting. And then, a day later, he showed up back where he was killable. So, and I really realized that these animals were traveling between water and feed.
Yeah.
And, whereas these Colorado bulls that are non-migratory are really localized. They may stay within a 2 or 3 mile patch of timber year round, unless something really crazy pushes them out.
Yeah, that's interesting. We haven't never talked about that on the podcast. Is hunting non-migratory elk versus migratory elk. A lot of guys, and this is where it differs from my experience. A lot of I can't say that because I've hunted Roosevelts a lot, and they're non-migratory as well. And they usually keep a really tight area versus bulls in New Mexico. They can go 10 miles just to take a drink of water and turn around and come right back. It's just insane. How do you, I guess, give us a little insight on hunting non-migratory elk versus migratory elk? Because you've probably done a little bit of both, having been in Colorado. I have,
and so the Flat Top wilderness area and mountain range is right out my back door here in Steamboat Springs, and that is probably that's the largest elk herd in North America, in the world really, and it's very migratory. So that elk herd migrates depending on where you are on the range, to the north and the west or down to the south. And so what those elk do is they're located in what we call over-the-counter units, as everybody knows them. So units where anybody can go out and pretty much hunt. And what I found out was, man, why am I not seeing any big bulls in these units? Now, there's some sleeper bulls in those units. Don't get me wrong, but these bulls and cows, when it starts snowing and they start migrating, they literally just start migrating and they just get shot. And as they continue to migrate, because they're going through over-the-counter units and they're going through private land that's outfitted, I mean, they literally just get hammered. And what that means is that it's very rare for a bull elk to reach 5.5 years old in those migratory areas. Now, I'm starting to see a few bulls, these 320, 330, and even a bigger bull killed in those flat top units here recently. But what I figured out is that, man, there's some of these elk we've had so many mild winters in a row in certain areas that there's some bulls that just aren't migrating. And so what I figured out is, where are these bulls? What are they doing? Why are they not migrating? And what is keeping them in these areas? So what happened was I started finding these huge bulls during the winter in places that my family that homestead in this valley has never seen elk during the winter. And so, the wheels started spinning in my head and I'm going, well, man, that totally makes sense why that bull's wintering right there. And, that has helped me to go in and figure out that, hey, some of these bulls are really localized and they're not moving. And if they don't move, they are not going to get shot, and they have a very high likelihood of reaching 5.5 years old. Kind of the second, aspect to that picture is, here in Colorado, we've got a lot of beetle kill timber that's really changing the face of our national forests and even a lot of private ground. And what these bulls that don't migrate have figured out is they can live in these patches of dark forest, dark black timber with it's a nightmare to get through this stuff. You've been through it. You have to climb over things, log jams. It's a disaster to get through. And these bulls will not, they rut in it, they summer in it, they winter in it, and they're in there year round. Literally the bull I killed last year, probably never left a mile radius of where I killed him. And I killed him in one of the wallows. I killed him on a late rifle hunt in one of the wallows that he'd been using during archery season. Literally, I shot him and had to deal with him in the wallow that he was using in archery season. And so that's kind of an example of, exactly what these bulls are doing. So it's kind of, this beetle kill timber has really changed the picture here in Colorado.
Why is it? Let's kind of break that down. Why is the beetle kill changing the aspect? Essentially, it's operating like a burn. So for those who don't know, the beetle kill area is basically these pine beetles are coming in and they can kill an entire forest, chunks of ground, and so you have a lot of standing dead timber. Now, what you're talking about with blowdown stuff. So if standing dead timber stays and you don't do anything with it, essentially it'll blow down and then create a checkerboard mess of deadfalls that you can't even get through. And then the problem is you got saplings coming up through that. But for a certain time period, there's a lot of light coming to that forest floor, which is creating a lot of undergrowth, which is creating mass amounts of feed, essentially, right?
Exactly.
And so you basically imagine you basically have a hayfield that is, instead of these elk having to migrate to find their feed, there's enough feed on the ground because it's a burn without a burn. And the problem, a burn is good because it creates new growth, but there's a number of years where if it's too hot, it'll torch off all that feed. So with a beetle kill, it's essentially a burn without the loss. So you get more light, more water to the forest floor, creating huge amounts of grass. And with the winters that we've been having, there's not enough snow to push them off that. So they're holding up in these beetle kill areas. That's interesting. Exactly.
And then you think about throwing a castle wall around it because of all the timber that has fallen down. Yep. And then you create a maze in the interior that these elk know and will never leave.
Yeah.
They're literally spending 4 seasons, every season, every year in these patches of timber. And they've got everything they need. And the cows will kind of come and go. But that is my big takeaway from Colorado right now.
Which is going to create, this is like a secret we should not even give on the podcast. That is going to create a bunch of units that are underrated because they have late season hunts that have never produced or shouldn't produce by a lot of aspects, but now will have bulls in them due to the change. There's always these things that change over time. And I guess if you're intuitive enough to watch the changes and see what's happening, this is how units shift. And you get, some units may have been popular for years and years and years, but that can flip, that can change. Circumstances like this, where you have, years of Beetle Kill now is changing the behavior of a lot of those bulls. Not only is it creating higher age classes because these bulls aren't getting killed migrating through units and being exposed, because if a bull's got a certain pocket, he can live a long time. And if he doesn't get in the way, a lot of these bulls get killed, migratory bulls get killed, and migratory herds generally don't have as high age class or as big as bulls because, they're exposed, they're vulnerable when they're migrating. So they're getting killed, migrating through these units, and just happen to be in the open when, happenstance, Hunter Joe sees him while he's deer hunting and shoots him. It'll be interesting to see how that changes that dynamic of a lot of the units in Colorado.
Yeah, I think we're kind of seeing a golden age in a lot of those units right now, Cody.
Yeah.
And, I have a cousin who's kind of an elk nut like I am, and he's a trad bow guy, and he's killing giant elk in junky over-the-counter units right now in Colorado as well. And so what we do is we just kind of bounce around, and there's probably 7 or 8 different units that are, steep, a lot of dark timber, and beetle killing them. And even these flat top units, there's a lot of units. I think there's big bulls in units that we haven't seen the likes of which for decades, just because of the way things environmentally are going. And I think there's more big mule deer I think there's a jumbo mule deer in every unit in Colorado right now.
Yeah.
And I literally am feeling that way about the elk situation. When, back in the day, we were killing spikes, and you killed a raghorn 4-point back in the day, man, you were something else. Now, it's got to be a 330, 340 and up type bull to get anybody's attention. So.
Yeah. And it's funny because there's a lot of people that'll say, Colorado's so overhunted. It's just a pumpkin patch and it's tough to get away from people and all these other things, which is true. A lot of that's true. But at the same time, if you can find these little holes, and that's like not giving away a secret because half of Colorado is beetle kill right now.
Oh man. And that's why I say, everywhere I spend a good bit of time, doesn't matter the unit. There are some big bulls getting grown up. But one thing to keep in mind with Colorado is don't hunt here. There's no elk. There's tons of people. We've got wolves, we've got grizzly bears and Sasquatch. So it's definitely not worth your time coming and hunting here.
Yeah. It's a lot like Montana. I think like 1 in 3 hunters dies. You should just stay away.
Yeah, it's gnarly. But if you look at social media, you'll see some of the bulls that are getting killed in Colorado in these units, and it's pretty damn impressive.
Yeah. So when it comes to like looking at, you have a lot of areas that I'm sure you just have so much knowledge of years of hunting your entire life that you can pull from. But when it comes to, say, you were forced to find a new area and things like that, say New Mexico, it's always tough to not pull from prior knowledge because you always have this like prior knowledge that impedes on that decision making. But what kind of things would you look for, in helping people find, what to even start with? And you had kind of touched on something earlier, and I wanted to circle back to it, and just looking at, areas that are not necessarily thought of from an elk standpoint, especially with the New Mexico. You were talking about big bulls being in areas where they probably don't normally.
Right. And I think, one thing to kind of let the cat out of the bag about my hunting style is I have made my killing elk in kind of fringe spots. I've killed elk, within legal distance off of the road, but off of a state highway where it looks like sheep type country. You've got to realize, if I was an elk, where is the pressure, not public pressure, where is the pressure, any pressure going to be coming from? Where are some nasty little spots where nobody's going to think about getting into or bother getting into or just drive by? Mm-hmm. There was a unit in New Mexico that's just west of Albuquerque. It gets a lot of tags and a lot of pressure. And it was one of those units where it's a huge unit. went into it blind going, my God, where am I going to hunt? I know all this high country, aspen and pine forest up top looks amazing, but man, every hunter who drawn a tag in that unit was up there. And I realized, man, there's some really good looking lower desert country down here. And 5-6 days later of just glassing those fringe areas, literally just walking 100 yards off the road and glassing down into nasty canyons, we walked out with a 380 plus bull and a kind of 300 plus inch bull. So
that's pretty dang good.
Both of which, are kind of, even the 300 inch bull was a damn good bull for that unit. But it was just fine. I just realizing, okay, everybody's driving by miles of this lower country. There's got to be elk in here. And so, whether it's looking for patches of scrub oak and steep canyons or mountain mahogany patches in New Mexico, just kind of paying attention to that nasty steep stuff. I think that's that is probably the best thing for killing big bulls anywhere. It's just nasty and steep.
Yeah. Where is nobody else going to go?
Exactly. I mean, and it goes without saying, everybody said that, but you've got to get a little more creative than even that. Yeah. And, I'm always surprised when I find a big bull, and sometimes I'm really surprised at where I found that big bull.
Oh, it's so true. I think inherently we all tend to, whenever I don't know what the quote is, I think it's Mark Twain, couldn't want to butcher this, but whenever you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time to pause and reflect. The typical way to look for a big bull is to look for the farthest point from a road. And inherently, I think we've shot out a lot of those big bulls. And so if you look backwards and think, okay, where's the next place? Where's the next thing? Is it, and it could be right next to a freeway. And that's so true across so many states. I think big bulls will get killed right next to big freeways because nobody thinks about that.
Dude, don't give up my secrets here.
We're just crushing your secrets. And if everybody's in your spot next year, you'll be like, God damn it, that Cody guy.
Yeah, no. There's but I mean, you literally, as generic as it sounds, you really have to think outside the box and get creative in terms of how you're going to hunt these units, and really figuring out where everybody else is hunting and how they're hunting. I think is the best thing I've done, and either getting away from that into a roadless section, on X, you can get into those roadless sections on there. That's great. You're going to find animals in there, but you've really got to take it to another level if you're going to start consistently locating and killing big elk.
Yeah. No, it's so true. One of the things that I was thinking the other day on a scout trip, you take the roadless areas, and inherently you're always going to have someone with horses that can outpush you. I mean, I have horses, and we're going to get to areas that you can cross anywhere, right? There's nowhere that's that far in the lower 48 that's that far from a road. I mean, you go 25 miles from something, you're probably pretty dang close to another road that's like, around the corner, and there's a guy on a four-wheeler sitting there. So it's thinking even farther outside of the box. It's like, what are the guys? And for me, it's, a matter of guys with horses are inherently lazy, which is going to sound bad, but a lot of people who have horses, and this is the same with four-wheelers. Like if you can get a four-wheeler somewhere, it makes you a little bit lazy because you don't want to get off the four-wheeler. Same is true with horses. So you get guys that will horseback in, 15, 20 miles, and that's great, but they aren't willing to hunt the nasty little crevices that are 20 miles back, or the nasty little hole that, maybe it's only 5 miles back. So like you have to think, it's like, that's just a little bit of how I think outside of the box, is like, how am I using an area to its benefit? If guys are in here with horses, or if guys are in here with four-wheelers, I actually like areas where people can hunt on a four-wheeler, because I know that makes the average hunter lazy. And if he can't see it from a four-wheeler trail, he's probably not going to hunt it. Because if he has access to hunt, 10,000 acres and ride his four-wheeler all over, he's less likely to get off the four-wheeler and go search this little hole where he can't see into.
Exactly. I agree with that. And I mean, that's something that I actually do, is try and figure out spots that are so nasty that you could never get horses into. Mm-hmm. And those are typically not attractive to the guys that are going to hunt within a mile, half mile or a mile of the road. And, they're just kind of in-betweeners. Yeah,
the in-betweeners. That's awesome. So I was doing some research on on what we're going to talk about, which this conversation took like 40 left turns from where I thought it was going to, which is fine because awesome stuff in here. But I found an article called Hunting with Harold, and I really wanted to ask you about it and kind of have you elaborate and tell the story a little bit because I love the article. It's on MeatEater's website, I think. Oh,
yeah. It's a piece I did for MeatEater back in the day. Kind of my growth as an elk hunter. I started hunting with both of my parents, really, but my dad more so than my mother. And, for a while he was my mentor. And then I really realized, I'm like, man, why am I following this noisy dude in the woods around who's just got 10 power Tascos? I want to go do my own thing. And so I started kind of doing my own thing and, got somewhat proficient at that. And really started feeling like, all right, I've got this elk hunting thing figured out. I'm just going to do things my way. And then, I had the fortune in my early 20s to start tipping over some pretty big elk in New Mexico on my own. And so I really kind of got, I kind of got egotistical about things. And I kind of lost sight of why I was hunting and how I was hunting and, literally stopped enjoying hunts because I was so worried about killing big bulls. I got so wrapped up in that I literally was just kind of walking around lost and started hunting with my dad again. And he would completely just piss me off. I mean, this is your classic guy of like opening up a can of smoked oysters or sardines in the middle of the day and spills half of it on his hunting clothes, walks up on skylines himself on ridges, walks the wrong way into the wind. I mean, just does everything wrong. And I was going, my God, I can't stand hunting with you. What is going on? But the guy would continually kill elk. And so I was like, God, man. And he finally just told me, he's like, hey, man, you need to relax. Just kind of enjoy, take a moment and just kind of enjoy the hunt. Don't worry about all the noise I'm making. Don't worry about hunting perfectly. He said, your problem is you're hunting, you're overthinking and overanalyzing everything so much that you just kind of losing touch of everything. You're kind of desensitized. So it took me a few years of getting really pissed off hunting with my dad to really realize that, holy cow, man, killing aside, this guy's really got it figured out. He is enjoying every moment of every hunt. He doesn't care if he kills anything or not. He doesn't care if he kills something that's huge or not. He's just here to have a good time and enjoy the hunt. And so that really, I think, helped launch me into the next phase of my hunting life, which is just kind of taking a step back, being more patient, and ultimately, I think it's helped me become a better hunter. So that's the long and short of it, man.
Which is funny because it's like it's the advice that you blow off in your younger years that becomes so prudent later in life, and everyone's telling you to be patient. You're like, I don't have time to be patient. Like, I got bulls to kill, and you're so ambitious. And then looking back on it now, it's funny to me the same way. It's like, yeah, it's good advice. Sound advice.
It is. And, it took me, a few hunts where I would just physically destroy myself. And my dad would just kind of take it easy. And I'd come back to camp and he'd have a bull down. And I would have literally put on, 10 plus miles of just murder country and have nothing to show for it. And wasn't enjoying myself. And here he was enjoying himself and doing what I considered to be half-assing it and getting it done. So, and I think there's a lot of value to that. Not only, it's great. I love when I can hunt with better hunters than myself because there's a lot of knowledge to be gleaned from those guys. And you ultimately become a better hunter by hunting with better hunters. But I think there's also something to be said for hunting with new hunters or hunters who are less educated than you might be, because it teaches you patience and it teaches you to slow down and enjoy things. And I think that is possibly one of the greatest takeaways that I've gotten from a lifetime of hunting. So
what would you consider, looking just in the upcoming year, like what would you consider a successful year this year? It's easy to say, what's a successful hunt to you and all these other BS shit that comes up. But like when you look at like just this year, you think about like, hey, what defines success this year?
Success this year is going to be, my wife loves the deer hunt. And so getting her out, spending time. I have 2 little kids, and both of my kids love the outdoors. So spending time with my father, my 2 kids, and my wife on these hunts is going to mark the success of my season. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to BS you and say, man, it won't matter if I don't kill a big bull or a big muley. That would be great, really awesome. But if I don't kill a single animal this fall, as long as I've gotten out with my kids and had a good time with them, my wife, and had quality time with my father and a few of my hunting buddies, that right there, I think that's the ultimate measure of success for me. I've learned to walk away from caring about killing big elk or needing to do that every year. And ironically, I think that's helped me kill more big elk. So, as weird as that sounds, counterintuitive as that may be, I really feel like smelling the flowers, walking down game trails with your kids and blowing elk out. And, it tests your patience, but there's nothing more rewarding. And I'll tell you what, I've learned that taking my son out is upped my odds of getting animals in the freezer tenfold.
He's a lucky charm.
So he's a total lucky charm. I mean, the kid does everything he can to blow hunts and stalks, and he's cost me a couple of big animals throughout the years. But ultimately, somehow we managed to get animals down together and just have a hell of a time. And he talks about it for the next year.
How old's your kid?
He is 6 now. And he was on his first serious elk hunt at 10 months old. Actually, it's an old Hushin video that I was hunting with the Hushin boys. They're down in my elk camp in New Mexico. So
how do you weigh that? I always wondered that with my dad taking me as a kid, and I'm sure I blew a lot of stuff. And I was with him on a number of kills, but how do you know when to take him? Like if you had a 380 bull, you spot up, and you're like, man, it's a big bull. Do you feel guilty not taking it? It's like, I got to get this done. Or like, how do you weigh that in your own personal dilemma?
So ironically, last year I found a 380 class bull on public land here in Colorado that I was dead set on killing. And, though my wife and I decided that this might be a hunt that, given the location of the animal, the short amount of time that I actually had to go hunt, and the big factor was that I'd already taken my son out a lot. Mm-hmm. And so we'd already done a bunch of hunting together. And so my wife said, you know what, why don't you just go focus on this for a couple of days and do your thing? And that was, I don't know. I always feel a little guilty or like something's missing in a hunt if my dad's not there, one of my best buddies isn't there, or my son isn't there. But I had that actually play out this year and ended up killing a really good bull with my father, but my son wasn't with me. And there's hunts where like that, there's a couple of feet of snow on the ground. You're in really steep, rocky terrain where there's times when you're really worried about falling and slipping because you could slide a long ways. Yeah. And, there's hunts where physically it's not worth having a kid with you where they could get hurt or they're going to be cold and miserable and not have an enjoyable experience.
Yeah.
So
I remember as a kid growing up, like Dad would always have days that I could go and then days that I couldn't. And I don't remember what they were, but I remember specifically being more excited when it was, my turn to go and like understanding like there was days when he went alone and days when I got to go. And I think it grows a lot. Like if I would have just been able to go all that I wanted, I don't know that I'd have the passion for it. Maybe not, who knows? But I specifically remember being so excited, to see what Dad got or didn't get. And like, yeah, you're bummed that you don't get to go and probably cried when he left, like, all pissed off. But like the anticipation and then knowing that next week on Tuesday I get to go, like you had to look forward to it. It's almost like it was held back a little bit, so it created more want. And I don't know, like I always think about that. Like how do you weigh, what you take your kids on, what you don't take your kids on, and things like that.
No, that's a really good point. I mean, it's kind of like the exclusivity of something. The more exclusive it is, it could be the most mundane thing in the world. But if you give it the illusion of being exclusive, people are going to want it. And so if you keep that special with your kids, I think you're right. They're going to want to do it. Whereas if you're one of those dads that's just gone hunting all the time and doesn't think about your kids, or drags them to camp all the time and they're miserable, too much of a good thing can be a bad thing.
Yeah.
So,
No, it's interesting. I do I like to split it up these days to have, like you were talking about, like one hunt with your, your dad or your buddies, or like have that camaraderie hunt. And I always like to, I think every year it changes as you get older. And I get that, like why you hunt changes as you get older. What you hunt for changes as you get older. The reasons you have kids, and that becomes the priority and things like that. And I think for me, it's always about having a little bit of all of that. I want to have a hunt that I do with my buddies. It's camaraderie, and I don't really care if we kill anything or not, because mainly I want to go to camp and drink beers with my buddies. Like I love having those every year. And, there's hunts that I want to do solo and test myself in the backcountry, and it's going to be miserable, and that's what I want. I'm just having a little bit of each every year. That's kind of where I look at, as a successful year to me is like, did I get to see new country? Did I get to hunt with old friends? Did I get to test myself, physically and mentally? And hopefully did I fill the freezer? And, all these other things. But like, those are kind of like a successful year from what I, envision upcoming years to look like.
Amen to that, man. I totally agree. That is something that everyone should aspire to. And I wish more guys, I think there's a lot of ego in the industry right now. And so there's a lot of, solo hunter, got to test myself, prove myself, kill something big solo. But I think that's a stage that a lot of hunters go through. Yeah. And you really get to a point where you realize that, there's some times where that's okay every year, and I really need to go do that. But it's not all about what a successful season is all about. And like you just touched on, I love nothing more than going to camp and having a few drinks with my buddies at night, and just kind of taking it easy on us and really just having fun. So, and
there's so many pieces to that puzzle, right? Like you can't skip sections. I look at kids that are 21 and hungry, they're hungry to get, kill a 500-inch bull. And I'm like, go get it, man. Like, cause like you won't appreciate the beers with bros hunt until you've really sacrificed a lot on the mountain, So there's like so many pieces of puzzle, and there's, where people are at. And so I look at guys that are getting into hunting, and you're like, I just want it for the meat. I'm like, that's great. Like, that's cool. That's where it starts. That's where it started for a lot of people. You're like, I want to fill the freezer. And like, I honestly think everyone should endure a solo hunt, like just testing yourself on the mountain. And then it's just kind of like the progression, right? And so like everyone should go through that. So I look at people who are coming up, and even myself, like I get that where I'm at right now, I don't have kids, so I don't have this like urge to want to show my kids all these things. And I'm sure when I'm there, I'll see it. But what I would like to see is like people respecting everyone else where they're at in that spectrum, right? Like if some dude's out to get a 400-inch bull, go get it, bro. Like crush it.
Yeah, no, I agree, man. Just, keeping everything positive. And let me tell you guys that if you're on that big solo kick right now, go do that shit right now while you can, as much as you can, because there may be a point in time that you have an injury or you move on from something, or professionally that you may not be able to go do that. So you got to go, whatever your dream is, whatever, it is that you need to go do hunting, go do it all as much as possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Cool, man. Awesome place to end. That was, I couldn't agree with you more. But if you guys want to check out more of your stuff, see what you're up to, where can we follow along with the journey, man?
Oh man, good old @Elk Tacos on Instagram is always good. I'm a fly fishing bum as well, and a lover of good photography, good food, good beer, good whiskey, and big elk.
Nice.
So, other than that, Cody Lujan. And that's about it. Kind of an under the radar kind of dude.
Well, one of these days we need to hook up and try some beers or something. I moved to Montana, which apparently means I need to learn how to fly fish. I don't know. Apparently it's weird that I don't fly fish. So I maybe we'll pick that up, but maybe you'll have to teach me how to fly fish one of these days.
Oh man, at the very least, we'll grab a beer. I'm in Bozeman quite a bit, so.
Hey, next time you're in town, hit me up for sure.
Oh, I definitely will. Hey, thanks for having me on, man. Great podcast. Love what you're doing out there, and look forward to sharing a campfire with you here in the future.
Yeah, let's do it. Thank you again, Cody.
Thanks, man.
I need a huge favor from you guys. We made a really funny video for Wapiti Wednesday promotion called Alcoholics. And the problem is Facebook put the kibosh on our promotional efforts and banned the video for promotion. So I need you guys' help in sharing it and getting it out there. Click the link in the show notes. Check out the video. It's pretty funny, and give it a share. I'm going to give away a bunch of Phelps diaphragms to people who help get it out there and get around this Facebook BS rules. So head over there, check it out, share the video. Much appreciated. Thank you guys so much. I think you like it, and I think you'll really like this episode with Cody Lujan. So thanks, guys. This episode of Wapiti Wednesday brought to you by Phelps Game Calls. Phelps Game Calls are hands down my favorite diaphragms, and I've tried out just about every diaphragm on the market, and the amp frame is what I carry. The amp frame, not only is extremely easy to use, but they're the most consistent calls you can find and extremely durable. As someone who can blow out a diaphragm in just a few days, the first time I used one of the new amp frame calls, I was blown away at how long it lasted. I can get a few weeks out of a single Phelps diaphragm versus a couple days out of just about any other diaphragm on the market. Personally, I like the amp gray and the amp white, but if you don't have any idea what to use or what to try, just grab 4 or 5 of them and see what you like. You know, some of you guys are going to like locating on one, and some of you guys are going to like the sexy cow calls on another. But either way, I think you'll be able to use any of them. They all sound great, and they all work super well. It's just kind of all on personal preference. A couple of you guys have asked me about the big bat bugles and if they're necessary. For me, 100%, I am naked in the woods without my bat bugle. The Phelps bat just gives me so much more reach when I'm bugling, as far as being able to be louder and carry a bugle farther into a canyon. If you only want to be the kind of guy that slips into a herd of elk and doesn't do a whole lot of screaming challenge bugles, even just having the bat as a locating tool is crucial. You can carry that bugle so much farther, locate a bull from farther away, and to me, it's an essential item in my toolkit. Go get yourself some Phelps game calls before they sell out. Before season comes, get to practicing, get good at it. Use the TRO code and you'll get free shipping off your entire order. This episode brought to you by Backcountry Fuel Box. Backcountry Fuel Box is my newest creation. It's a monthly subscription box full of backcountry meals, snacks, bars, and all kinds of cool high-energy options for your next backcountry adventure. I started the box because I wanted a way to try out all the cool new backcountry food options that were on the market. And also, so I would always have stuff on hand for my own adventures. There's just so many cool new options available. The June box had all kinds of great products and new companies that I think most people have probably never heard of. Brands like 4 Points Bars, Peak Refuel, Dark Mountain Energy, just to name a few. All in all, the June box was packed full with 10 awesome products and discount codes to all the companies within the box. Enough to taste test a few of the items and to hide the rest in my tote for September. The box is $33.30 a month, but if you use the TRO at checkout, use the TRO code, you'll get the box for $29.97 a month, and it is full of awesome stuff that you're actually going to use. Also, I just want to say a big shout out to all of you who have been sharing the box when you get it on social media. I am thoroughly humbled by the dozens and dozens of people that have been helping grow this thing, and it really does mean the world to me. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. There's a whole bunch of awesome stuff coming from this whole Backcountry Fuel project, and you guys have been awesome and instrumental in helping me get there and kind of grow this whole thing. So if you guys haven't yet, go check it out. Give it a try. There's literally zero commitment. I'm not trying to scam anyone. I just want everyone to stay signed up because the box is so awesome. Head over to backcountryfuelbox.com. Check it out. You won't be disappointed. Get signed up if you want to be a part of the July box. All right. Thanks, guys. Hey, thanks for tuning in to Wapiti Wednesday. If you guys have questions that either we didn't cover in this episode or you just like to see in future episodes, be sure to drop us a line at info@therichoutdoors.net or be sure to join the Rich Outdoors Insiders group on Facebook for more information as well as some really cool gear giveaways. Thanks for listening, guys.